on water. It's the height of Jesus' ministry. The Son of God is walking, talking, healing the masses, and mingling with the sinners and saints. In fact, he has just performed the miraculous. Over 10,000 men, women, and children fed with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. It's the next day, and Jesus sends the disciples to sail across the lake, and he goes off to pray. It's a beautiful scene. Jesus' power has just been put on display. The disciples are off and sailing. The people have been fed. Everything is perfect in this moment. But then, night falls. The scene shifts. The disciples are out on the middle of the lake. Jesus is nowhere to be found, and there is a storm coming. The panic sets in. The anxiety of this moment. Dawn is approaching, the promise of sunlight and relief from the storm when the disciples see something out on the lake. It looks like the figure of a man, but in fear they think it's a ghost. But then they hear a familiar voice, the voice of Jesus, and he says, "Don't be afraid. Take courage, I am here." But Peter, still in disbelief that the man he knows, Jesus, could be walking on water, says, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." And Jesus says, "Yes, come." So Peter goes. One foot over the edge of the boat and then the other. He is walking on the water towards Jesus. But then he remembers the raging wind and the waves and everything of the storm going on around him. And in a moment, he starts to get fearful. He starts to panic. And before you know it, he's sinking. The wind is tossing him from side to side. The waves are crashing over him. He can barely keep his head above water, and he cries out, "Save me, Lord!" Can you imagine what Peter's thinking in this moment? The anxiousness. What am I going to do now? Who is going to save me? How am I going to get out of this? Where am I going to go next? Anxiety. You can feel the anxiousness of this moment, the wind, the waves, everything, all of the chaos going on around Peter. One minute he is walking on the water towards Jesus, and the next he's drowning. This is the story of Peter, a loyal, loving follower of Christ. He stood with Jesus on mountaintop highs. He healed people. He saw Jesus feed the masses, and even Peter was anxious. You see, there's no shame in being anxious. There's no shame in asking for help. Even the disciples of Jesus felt anxiety at some point or another. So why do we feel like we need to look elsewhere whenever we're anxious? Why isn't God our first choice? He is there, he is ready, he is waiting to help us just like he did Peter and all the other disciples in this moment. God can be our first place that we turn when we're anxious. Anxiety is a trigger for trust. Now, I'm not saying trust God and everything will be okay, because it's not always that easy. But I can guarantee you that trusting God will always help on your journey. You see, our external world is hardly ever at peace. There's always things going on around us. But God guarantees that when you trust in Him, your internal world will be at peace. He doesn't want you to be anxious. He wants you to have rest. And God is looking at you saying, "Come to me and I will give you peace." Have you ever felt like Peter? Like one moment you're fine and the next you're sinking and you're panicking. The world feels too much to handle. It all feels hopeless, and you just want to bottle it up and keep it inside. You want to accomplish big things, but you don't think you can because you have anxiety. And maybe you've sold yourself short. You think, because I have anxiety, I will never accomplish anything big. But Jesus. Matthew 14 says that immediately Jesus reached out a hand and caught Peter. He said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And they climbed in the boat, the wind died down, and they worshiped God. And I think sometimes we see this story and we see Peter in a negative light, but in reality, Peter was one of Jesus's chosen few. Why? Because Jesus knew that Peter needed him, that he had faith. Jesus did not see Peter as a warrior or someone with anxiety, but he saw him as a rock. So what if you too were not rocked by the waves of this world, but you were a rock of stability because you are grounded in the truth and the presence of God? What if your anxiety was a trigger to trust and not panic? What if when the world feels overwhelming, you turn and you focus on God? The truth of God being the giver of peace does not depend on if there is peace around you. The truth of God being the giver of comfort does not depend on if someone is comforting you. The truth of God being Redeemer does not depend on whether or not your situation has been redeemed. God is constant. Even when the world feels like too much, God in His goodness reaches down. When the wind is raging, when the waves are crashing over your head, God reaches down to save you, just like He did for Peter.
Hey guys, if you liked the video, move the cursor that you see on your screen to the like button and click. While you're at it, take that same cursor to the subscribe button, also click. Seriously, you're not going to want to miss out on what's coming up.